So this is a sketch document, and one of the really cool things about the sketch file format is that it's actually just a zip archive, and it's a publicly documented zip archive structure. And in fact, if we unzip this file, what we get is this folder hierarchy where we have our images, which are the images contained within the sketch document, and then we have our various JSON files which determine how the artboards and the layers and the links are laid out within the sketch document. Now, this is pretty cool because one of the features that we offer at InVision is a product called Craft, which actually allows you to build interactive prototypes inside of a sketch document, which you can then sync to the InVision Cloud product. So what I wanted to see is if I could take sample data, sample prototype data, and programmatically generate an interactive sketch document. So I put together this sort of simulation of a prototype, which has a series of screens here. I don't know why the preview is not showing up. And then a JSON data structure, which links them all together. And let's take a look at that JSON structure. You can see it has the prototype. It has 5 screens. Here are my individual steps. And then I have a myriad of hotspots that live on a particular screen and then link to another screen within the prototype. So what we want to do is take this data, generate a sketch document, and then sync that sketch document to the InVision Cloud product using InVision Craft. So let's go ahead and hit this generate CFM file. And there we go. And if we jump back here, you can see this just generated prototype.sketch. Let's go ahead and open that up. And here you can see are all of the screens from this prototype. And in fact, if we click on the prototyping tool, the interactivity tool, what you can see is that I have linked up all of the various hotspots to link to the other artboards. So we've taken the images, we've translated them as artboards, and we've taken all the hotspots and we've translated them as rectangles that have this interactivity that links to other artboards. Now let's go ahead and try and sync this. And we're going to create one. Sketch sync demo 3, because I think I've done it a bunch of times. I keep failing at this video. 1 pixel density, let's publish. There we go, it's publishing to the Cloud app. Now let's open it up in the Cloud app. And here are all the screens that I just published. And if we click through, and let's go into build mode, and you can see that we have all of the hotspots generated from the interactive sketch document. If we go back into preview mode, you can see that I can click through, and all of that is working. So that's really cool. I think that's pretty cool. It's amazing what we can do with Cold Fusion, and it's really awesome that the sketch document file format is such an open standard. So now let's take a look at the Cold Fusion code quickly just to see how this worked. There's actually quite a bit of code. It's a couple of hundred lines, so I'm going to try and just do a quick high-level overview. Essentially, we're going to create a temp directory. Inside that temp directory, we're going to create this sketch archive folder. That's the folder that's eventually going to be zipped up into the .sketch zip archive. We have our images, we have our pages directory, and then essentially we're going to read in that JSON payload. We're going to read in this JSON payload. We're going to translate it into a page data. The sketch files are organized by pages. The pages then have artboards as layers, and the artboards have images and rectangles and so on and so forth as layers. So we take this source data, we translate it into page data, then we write that page data to disk. We then take that page data, we generate user data, write that to disk. We do the same with metadata, we write the metadata to disk, and the same with documents, we write the documents to disk. And then eventually we compress the sketch directory. This is going to use the zip command line tool to compress this as the .sketch file, or sorry, this as the .sketch file. I could not use Lucee's built-in compression algorithms because it generated a valid sketch file, but Craft Manager couldn't use it, so I had to use the command line tool for zipping. This get page data is probably the most complicated, so let's just quickly look at this. And what you can see is really all I'm doing is taking one JSON structure and translating it into another JSON structure. So here's my pages. The pages have layers, which we're going to populate in a moment. We have to keep track of some ID mappings because of the hotspots need to link from one artboard to another, so we need to know the artboards ahead of time. And then you can see we take these screens and we're going to map it into layers. Each artboard starts with a bitmap layer, and that is the actual screen. You can see that the dimensions of the bitmap match the screen dimensions. We then have the hotspots. We get the hotspots for this particular screen. We're going to then map each hotspot onto a rectangle, and that rectangle is going to have user info here that defines how Craft Manager is going to store the interactivity. To be honest, I know very little about this data structure. This is all based on just some reverse engineering that I've done. You can see that it links to a target artboard, which is why we had to keep track of the artboard ID mappings based on the screen IDs. Then each artboard, you can see, matches the dimensions of the screen, right? So we have essentially an image, a bitmap layer, and that bitmap layer and the artboard layer are exactly the same size, and that's it. And the rest of this basically does the same thing. User data, let's see, we can look up here. Here's the metadata, again, just translating one JSON structure into another. And yeah, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Just a fun experiment, proof of concept here, being able to, again, generate an interactive sketch file that allows us to pre-populate hotspots here for the interactivity within the sketch. The goal here would be for users to be able to take a old flat prototype and then sort of kickstart a Craft Manager based workflow without having to do a big bang reconstruction of their entire prototype. So sort of just giving users the leg up to maybe try and evolve their prototyping workflow into something that allows for more seamless integration as we allow in Craft. So anyway, just a fun proof of concept. Hopefully some interesting stuff in here.